Everybody, welcome back. This is topic 3 of Unit 1, the political dimension of sporting organizations. You may notice on the syllabus, or if you just looked in sort of the outline of this unit, that in a couple of topics we'll be talking about the sporting dimension of political organizations. So both sets of organizations are supposed to be distinct from the other. In other words, sporting organizations are not supposed to be political, and political organizations are not supposed to dabble in sports, but they both do. And they both do because it's an effective use of their time and a good way to reach their constituencies, whether those constituencies are athletes or fans or advertisers or journalists or a whole host of other things, where it's clear that if they spend their time and energies working on things that drive them to the other, that they'll get further with their aims than otherwise. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's like trying to get an immunization campaign going to take care of a certain disease. And so if you do that through a little league organization like happened with polio in the United States in the 1950s, then you work through the city and you work through the organizations to get there. That's a political governmental entity working with a non-governmental organization or sporting group to try and accomplish those aims. And they could be much larger or much smaller. It depends. So today's the political dimension of sporting organizations, and away we go. So for some of you, this part may be new information, and for others, what an NGO is old news to you. An NGO, and I'm sorry about the way the titling works on this page. I can't make a lowercase s. It's NGO, capital N, capital G, capital O. It stands for non-governmental organization. So these are organizations to which governments do not formally belong. It doesn't mean they don't partner with them, but it does mean that it's representatives from a region or representatives of a country who are part of it, but they're just citizens. They're not government formal officials. Now, certainly government officials are allowed to be involved in things on their own time, but they're not doing so in their role as government officials. So you're familiar with some of these. You may not have called them NGOs, but you'll be aware of what they are and what they do. And one of these most famous ones is the International Committee of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. So that's the one here in the top right-hand corner. And you'll see that there's actually 3 symbols, and that's because the Red Cross is an inefficient symbol to use if you're trying to accomplish what they try to do in terms of providing disaster relief and helping in some other ways if you're in a Muslim country. So there they use the Red Crescent, which is a common symbol in Islam. And then for the other countries that are neither Christian nor Muslim or have those traditions as their main one, there's a red crystal, that sort of square or diamond shape there. So the International Committee of the Red Cross and Red Crescent organizes things and lobbies for things and works on projects at the international level. They try and gather support for their ideas at the United Nations and other places where they need to get things done. So you'll find them in interesting places, like when countries are getting together to discuss what responsibilities they have to each other in terms of prisoners of war or treatment of civilians. The Red Cross is there, not the Idaho Red Cross or the American Red Cross, but the International Committee of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. They'll be there as a voice trying to accomplish things, and they're respected and treated that way. But there's also an American Red Cross that handles things nationwide. And here's where things might get a little confusing about an NGO being separate from a government. Just like we're going to see sporting NGOs supposedly being separate from governments. They are, but because governments find utility in working through these NGOs, it gets a little confusing. For example, the United States, since 2005 with Hurricane Katrina, has the government itself has formally recommended Americans give money to the Red Cross, so the Red Cross can participate in that initial aid and succor going to people who are affected by the natural disaster. So there's still a Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, that's a U.S. government agency that's going to go out and do some things. But they actually partner with the American Red Cross at that national level. Similar to that, if you are looking at a disaster in the state of Idaho or Eastern Oregon, so the American Red Cross chapter of Greater Idaho includes some of those counties in Eastern Oregon, then the state government will work with them. But it's not because it's a state government entity. It's an NGO that does really interesting work. So there are all kinds of reasons and rationales for NGOs to form. They form based around whatever they find valuable and viable. And on that last slide, we suggested that there were different levels right? That one worked internationally, one worked nationally, and one worked more recently in the state. There's actually county organizations and stuff too. But a local NGO could be focused on the international system. So this page shows a series of organizations that have received an award from the Martin Institute at the University of Idaho called the Distinction International Service Award, which recognizes NGOs based in the Northwest that do international work. And so from 2018 to 2022, the recipients do very distinct, different things. So African Road does business development and incubators in Africa. So they try and nurture small business. Stove Team International works on clean cook stoves, which is one of the major problems around the world is families getting very sick and or dying from charcoal or poison, other things that emit poisons in their stove systems in their homes. Peace Trees Vietnam does clearing of land of unexploded ordnance from way back in the Vietnam War and does some healing and partnership programs. Because International, that's based outside of Boise, they make something called The Shoe That Grows. Really interesting. You should look that one up. You could look all of these up, of course, but about what they do and how they do it to try and help people with footwear. And Terra Graphics International Foundation, right here in Moscow, they do they try and get lead and other poisons out of soil because it often makes most vulnerable people sick and die. Lots of kids get that. So they don't have to just be strictly international, national, local. They can be based somewhere and work somewhere else. Essentially, they have the right to do whatever they want to do as long as they get partnerships and they go out and do things outside. And just the way those are focused on a specific thing, on removing unexploded ordnance or business development or clean cook stoves, there are NGOs whose job it is to work on the promotion and organization of specific sports. So we're going to look in a little bit today at organizations that use sport to accomplish other aims. But the whole point is sport. So, a bingo. We're going to call these bingos. These are big international NGOs that are sporting in nature. So we're going to use the phrase the rest of the semester, sporting bingo, to discuss these organizations that run sports around the world. So the main ones that we'll talk about this semester, in fact, we'll have a whole lecture on them next week, or not next week, just the next lecture, whenever you watch it, is the International Olympic Committee and the Fédération Internationale de Football Associations, or FIFA, which handles soccer. But if you've got a sport, odds are you've got a bingo. And so World Athletics, that's track and field. This one in the top corner with the hands is FIBA, or the World Basketball Association. You have rugby, you have swimming, you have cricket, you have a whole host of others. Because if you want to promote your sport internationally, you want to organize internationally, then you need to have one of these. So all of these on the page, except for the IOC, are called IFs. Now, an IF was referred to in a document you would have read for 1-2 that talks about Olympic eligibility. An IF is an international federation. So international federations, right? So the International Federation for World Athletics. So World Athletics is both a sporting bingo and an IF. The Olympics is not an IF. The Olympics has an event. So it is a sporting bingo, but it coordinates an event for the other IFs, or for the IFs, not the other IFs because they're not an IF, right? So when swimming wants to negotiate how many spots there are for swimming in the Olympics, it's the IF of swimming, FINA, who goes and talks to the IOC and lobbies to get those spots. So the job is to promote swimming. The job is to promote inclusion and access and building of pools and standardization, etc. And that's their job. So we will use this sporting bingo concept on through the rest of the semester. And an IF will be referred to many times. Now, these are supposed to be apolitical. Apolitical means it's outside of politics. And the protestations, particularly out of FIFA and the IOC, are always that they are apolitical. They don't have anything to do with politics. But they make so many decisions that have political ramifications that it's hard not to be. Now, they do try and make rules to prevent over-politicization. And so what you'll find, and we'll look at later in the semester, is things they say about what kinds of, if, say, for example, you're on the medal stand at the Olympics, you've won a medal. What are you allowed to do? Can you have a protest? Can you wear something besides your national uniform? Can you raise a different flag? What can you do or what can't you do? And they have rules about that to prevent over-politicization. One of the ways they politicize, even de facto. So I don't know, de facto and de jure, right? De jure means legally, like by law. De facto means just in fact. So when they pick a host nation, or when they allow or don't allow countries to join, or aspirant countries to join, they are making a political statement. The fact, as we learned in Unit 1, that Chinese Taipei has the right to participate in sports is a decision made by the IOC and FIFA. That's political in nature, that the People's Republic of China does not like. But they were also able to prevent Taiwan from using its name, Republic of China. Also a political decision. Now you could say it's just logic, it's just wisdom that they figured out how to have both these things coexist in some way, but they also then create a decision that has some weight and power and authority in the international system. So also picking hosts, so if you say we're going to take our gigantic tournament and we're going to turn it over to this country and they're going to have their flag fly and they're going to have the right to do an opening ceremonies and really stage this thing gloriously, then you're giving some sort of tacit approval. They'll say they aren't, but that's what the countries view themselves. They'll say, we've been legitimized. They believe in us. So we'll come back to this over and over again, but theoretically the NGO is sporting bingos are apolitical. The challenge, of course, is that politicians love these. Countries know they can leverage it. Sporting bingos make decisions all the time. So it's hard to disassociate. So why do politicians turn to this? We'll look at this a lot more in Unit 2, particularly when we talk about sports space. But because these sports and sporting endeavors are popular with their citizenry, it's very useful for politicians to turn to the sports. So there is no formal role for these U.S. presidents with the Olympics. Nothing formal. But there's George Bush. He's in the with the U.S. athletes at the opening ceremonies of the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. And you got to talk about a place where the politics and the emotions and the nationalism come together. This is just a few months after 9/11. It was a very important moment in the United States. Bill Clinton with the Atlanta Olympics and the U.S. Gymnastic team. One of the things Barack Obama was well known for was his love of basketball. There he is with the U.S. women's basketball team. And Donald Trump, who did not have an Olympic to go to while he was president because of COVID, did have the chance to host the Olympic team at the White House. So these come up all the time. Politicians will turn to the sports because it's very useful. And again, we'll look at this much more later on. So one of the things that they're able to do, they try and do in trying to keep them from governments from interfering, is they have a hard and fast rules. And so we're going back to the IFs and the sporting bingos now. Hard and fast rules against government interference. They don't care if the governments provide money. That's a separate thing we'll look at in two topics down. But they do care if they interfere. So the IFs, the international federations, below them are national federations. So what they try and prevent is meddling in national federations by governments, third-party governments. So if you suspend them for cause, you say you've been suspended, then it's a big deal because, again, the citizens, the voters, the consumers, they care if it's been suspended, and you put pressure on the government to change. So Nigeria was suspended for a while, Portugal was suspended for a while, Togo was suspended for a while. Currently, I think Pakistan either just came back from suspension or has been suspended. The country of Chad, Zimbabwe, Kenya, and sometimes they only suspend the officials. Sometimes they suspend the whole federation. When they suspend officials, it means that they sort of a caretaker role. They suspend the whole thing. They can't participate in any games, and so that would mean that FIFA could suspend. It hasn't happened, but it could suspend the U.S. Soccer Federation, Swimming, FINA, Aquatics Canada, FIBA, the Spanish Basketball Federation, ICC, the Board of Control of Cricket in India, etc. So the other kind of NGO is to be an issue NGO that uses sport or play to accomplish your aim. And to this end, we have this question: can sports save the world? If you use sport to accomplish other things, what is possible? And we hosted this big event in 2013 about sport and what role it can play. And in fact, you'll end the semester by considering this question and reading an article can sports save the world? So here's your takeaway.